What's up guys, it's Mangatime once again here to bring you my review of Bleach 608, Darker Than the Blackest of Black. At least that's according to the manga stream translation. And I'm quite glad that translation's out actually because, like, the original translation was confusing as hell. Yeah, it starts off with a really interesting page actually. Not necessarily because of the content, although that is interesting as well, but more because of it's just, we rarely ever do we see Kubo drawing such a detailed environment. And the page looks fantastic as a result. But it's very interesting to see the Vandenreich from so far away because it looks so peaceful, you know. And we kind of know what the hell's been going on inside there, but from outside it looks like just really peaceful, other than the couple of like plumes of smoke rising up. And we see like a little river, and there's like two deer, I think they are. I can't really tell, to be honest. Like having a little drink, and then there's like a salamander in the water. But it's really interesting because we see that there is like nature in the Soul Society. But then we notice that the salamander, which is black, starts to its color kind of begins to ebb away from it. And then we see Ichibei using his release command for Ichimonji, blacken. And we then get to see Ichibei, and he's really rocking the crazy faces again this week. And before we get into this properly, I just want to say that Kubo's art is on point this week. Again, like this whole fight so far has just had some seriously amazing artwork. Ichibei's just there holding his sword. I don't really know how. Like he looks awesome though, and he's got like a ring of ink behind him. And like I have to say that I love the whole calligraphy theme. It's just really cool, and allows for some really cool artwork. And I love the whole like the brushwork thing. It just works really well. It looks really cool. And you know, Yhwach's not looking too happy, and he looks at the sword and he's like, so his brush became a blade. It's really huge, but I don't feel any reatsu off it. That's interesting. Does that mean Ichibei is transcendental? No, transcendent. That's what I meant to say. Does that mean he's transcendent? It's hard to say. It would imply that. But then Yhwach, I don't really understand this bit. Yhwach then sees the blade as a brush again, but then it goes back to being a blade, and like so, I don't presume it ever actually turned back into a brush. What I suspect happened is that Yhwach sensed that the blade would still act as a brush. So that's kind of what I think happens. And then Ichibei says something like, "Are you having a hard time distinguishing the difference between a blade and a brush?" Which is cool, you know. That's a cool line. And they basically go in to attack each other, and this whole chapter is just them fighting again. And as they clash, it says Bleach 608, and there's just a spray of ink, and it looks really cool. It goes out everywhere. It goes flying from the little, the pathway they're standing on, and it says Darker Than the Blackest Black. And so basically this whole chapter is just them fighting again, but there are some really cool artwork here, and there's some really cool scenes, which just again proves that Kubo's pretty much going all out with this fight and making it look as awesome as possible. And they clash, and it's like a really furious and awesome looking page, and they like try and swing at each other, and like Yhwach's just kind of like, what is this? Whoa, my phone's just like sinking. Oh well, that'll do. And he's just like, what is this sword? It's like it's spraying ink everywhere, but I still can't cut through it. So it is still acting like a paintbrush, even though it's a blade. And it's quite interesting because I presume that every time Ichibei swings it, it sends ink flying everywhere. And Yhwach's like, it doesn't matter though if it can still cut names in half, because as we've seen, I can always bring my powers back. And then he's about to reveal the name of his sword. He says, I can do this with my, and then he's like, with my what? What was it called again? So basically, he forgets the name of his blade. This is interesting. I didn't get this at all in the manga reader version. I kind of presumed it was what he was talking about, but he doesn't actually mention his sword anywhere or anything like that. So you have to kind of work it out for yourself. Manga stream, much clearer. He's like, he can't remember the name of his sword, and Ichibei's like, what was that? Go on, come on. You can't remember the name of your sword, because it no longer has a name. But before we move on, I just want to point out that's quite interesting that Yhwach's blade has a name. So, like, I've seen someone say on a forum that maybe this is his armpok toe. I doubt it. I just suspect he's named it, like, you know, Uryu named his bow Ginrei Kojaku. So, I don't think this is Zanpakuto. But, at the same time, I don't know if it's... I don't know necessarily how its name relates to its power. That's just not something we've ever really learnt. For Quincy's, at least. But at least what we're getting from Ichibei is that names in Bleach indicate power. The fact that Yhwach's blade no longer has a name means it no longer has any power, essentially. We get an aerial shot of the pathway again, looks pretty cool. We get to see the two lines, again, that indicate the space that Ichibei will defeat Yhwach, so clearly that's going to come into play eventually. And Ichibei says that anything cut by Ichimonji in his shikai form just loses its name completely. No more of this halving rubbish, it just loses its name. And so we see that Yhwach's got ink splattered on him, though he hasn't lost his name yet. And I would presume that's because he hasn't been completely covered, or the only other thing I can think of is that it's because it's covered his clothes, not his skin, which is something that comes up towards the end of the chapter. Anyway, yeah, Ichibei's like, that without a name doesn't have any power, and he's like, your sword has no name, and your cross has no name, and we see that he splattered the Quincy cross. And there's this epic picture of Ichibei that is, like, properly, like, drawn with a brush kind of thing. And he's like, the chance of you killing me is not looking too great anymore, is it? And it looks crazy as hell, basically. So yeah, it's really interesting that we start learning a bit more about names in Bleach. I kind of feel like maybe this is something that should have been brought up a little bit earlier. I mean, it kind of was, like, knowing the name of your Zanpakuto and all that. But it's starting to sound like it applies to all races, which is interesting. Yhwach then pulls his hand forward and these lights appear on his fingers, and he says that, if you can take away the name of my blade, I'll just bring my powers back. I'll just, by stealing yours. We know Yhwach can do this. We know he has the power to take things away from people. And this huge Quincy cross light appears, like, literally it's massive, it's called Sankt Altar. And basically it's aimed at stealing Ichibei's powers away from him. And, like, again, this battle is crazy cool, man. Like, the artwork is ridiculous, the set pieces are really great, and, like, I would love to see this fight animated. Like, the blue kind of abilities of Yhwach against, like, the inky blackness of Ichibei's calligraphy. It'd be awesome. And then, I don't quite understand. I do kind of understand this bit, but not exactly. Ichibei's power is I think it is stolen from him. I think that's what the black ink is that shoots away from him. I think that's him losing his power. But what Yhwach is surprised about is the fact that he hasn't actually received it. So Ichibei is like, don't make that face. You did steal my power, but you can't take it. So the power just kind of disappears, I presume. He then reveals that his power is blackness, essentially. And that is literally the colour black. So basically, what I think happened here is that he lost his powers, but his blade, Ichimonji, just collects darkness. And we see it collecting the darkness from the salamander at the beginning, and then we see it collecting darkness from the bodies of the Shinigami, the boots of the Quincy's, and, like, their eyepieces as well. And then it shows it collecting it from Urahara, which is pretty weird because I'm sure Urahara is just green, but oh well. And then so yeah, we see that Ichibei is literally gathering the colour black to Ichimonji, so that's him getting his power back. It seems almost a little bit convenient, and it seems quite similar to Yhwach's powers, that he can take things and give them away. Like Ichibei can halve power and also get his back. But it does kind of make sense, and essentially his sword, Ichimonji, is just like this beacon that just attracts the colour black to it, essentially. And then he says, every last bit of black in this world bends to my whim. And we get this frankly amazing double colour it's not colour, what I'm talking about, double page at the end of the chapter. Ichibei has this properly evil look on his face. Like, if you had just jumped into Bleach, you'd probably think Ichibei was the bad guy from reading this. But yeah, Ichibei's got no pupils again. It's written in the black speech bubble again, which looks awesome. And the divide between the picture of Ichibei, and there's also a picture of Yhwach getting slashed, I'll get into that in a minute. The picture of Ichibei and Yhwach is just like ink splatters. It looks amazingly good. But the picture of Yhwach, now it's actually kind of creepy. It makes Yhwach look really creepy. But he's been, like, sliced completely across the face by this ink. What does that mean? I suspect it means he's lost his name. Because Yhwach hit him properly on the skin. So if Yhwach's blade works like I believe it does, Ichibei's blade works like I believe it does, Yhwach will no longer have a name. That's quite significant, because it would mean that Ichibei has taken away all of Yhwach's powers. I think we can pretty much all agree that Ichibei's probably going to lose this fight, unless something crazy does happen. And we all know that Yhwach's name isn't Yhwach, at least technically isn't, because he gave himself that name. He heard his people around him saying Yhwach, worshipping the god, and then he was like, yeah, I'm going to call myself that, that's cool. So I don't know where this is going to go next week, but that would be really interesting if it actually played into Yhwach's real name or something like that, because you'd think that he would lose his real name. So I don't know. It's going to be hard to say. He might just lose the name Yhwach, and that'll be what we play with. But it'll be interesting to see. I'm going to give this chapter. I don't really know what to give it. I kind of want to give it a 9, but I also think I'm probably going to give it an 8. Yeah, I'm going to give it an 8 because really, even for a fighting chapter, not much happened this week. Like Yhwach did one cool move. Ichibei did maybe a couple. No, in fact, Ichibei probably did one as well. Like really, not a lot happened. Actually, I'm not sure where the pages went. Well, I think there was 2 double-page spreads in this, actually, which doesn't help. That takes away, like, an extra 2 pages. So, yeah. But it was a really nice chapter. The artwork was absolutely top-notch. And the fight between Ichibei and Yhwach just keeps getting more and more badass. Now we just have to, like, ask ourselves the question, when is Yhwach going to whip out Zanken Otachi? And that might be what he resorts to next. If he loses his powers... excuse me. If he loses his powers because Ichibei has cut his skin... he can just use Yamamoto's powers, because you'd think that wouldn't come under the same thing. So, who knows? We'll see maybe next week. I've heard somewhere there's no chapter for 2 weeks, which sucks balls. Because it's Christmas time, and you all know that the chapters are completely, like, out of whack as far as Christmas is concerned. So, we could get a chapter whenever. So, yeah, that's it from this week, guys. Let me know in the comments below what you thought. There's not an awful lot going on in this week's chapters, so let me know in the comments what you thought. Don't forget to subscribe, that'd be amazing, guys. But until next week, I'll see you later.